Hi, everybody. Welcome to Tech Bros Friday. Hi, Davis Vance, who's been waiting for us. Sorry we're late. StreamYard, the streaming service we use to go live, has changed and updated their UX. Amazing service, by the way, but just very slight confusion with some of the updates. So happy to be here as always. Lauren, what do you want to talk about before we bring our amazing guest on?
Oh, I don't know. I think big news this week. I mean, continued layoffs. We see Shopify, been a darling the last couple of years with the rise of D2C, everyone doing their D2C businesses. They laid off 20% of their staff and looks like their logistics business, they are basically offloading it to Flexport, which is a really interesting move. I am not sure what to make of this. I've in the past took positions for and against Shopify. Just excuse me. I've always thought that Shopify is very much like a long tail business. And if you look at how they make their money off of merchants fees, and if you look at how they make their money off of what they do in transactions, like yeah, good business and everything. It makes total sense. But as in e-commerce, do they want to own logistics? Do they want to own the parcel packaging delivery? What do they want to offer to their customers? They've always had a graduation problem. Like a lot of companies will start with Shopify, then when they get to a certain number, usually it's like top line revenue that they're doing. They want to move off the platform, and Shopify has not done well in the last couple of years. After that, pandemic stimulus, they've kind of gone downhill a little bit with how the company's operated, and yeah, it's really interesting to see what the future holds for them. But yeah, they laid off 1 out of 5 employees, and they're offloading their logistics business to Flexport, which
A
is
lot of
another interesting company to look at.
And another, yeah, we were talking about that right before air, talking about people who'd worked at Flexport. I know some people at the Shopify layoffs. A lot of data people were laid off, so that sucks royally, right? I'm going to give my usual rant about layoffs, which is, I don't have the numbers, but I can pull them up, or one of you can pull them up. We all have Google and ChatGPT and all the other services to do our research for us. A lot of women, a lot of minorities, a lot of people over 40 being laid off, and keep an eye out for that. Shout out to one of my favorite tech bros, Miko Yuck. Look her up on LinkedIn, who's been writing about this, about the fact that, we've had over the past few years, there was, huge corporate efforts for DEI. And, are we seeing kind of a backlash to that with some of the layoffs? Like once it, what's the expression? Once things get real, they just stop. Companies stop those DEI efforts and go back to having, mostly white dudes working in high-paying roles. I don't know, but I know among the layoffs that I'm seeing, I saw a company, a startup that laid off a ton of women over the past few weeks, including a couple who are out on maternity leave. It's pretty gross. I'm fully agree with your critique, Lauren, that there's a ton of bloat in tech, in small companies and big companies. Layoffs probably should be happening, but they should not be affecting only women and minorities. So yeah, with that, let's bring in Sarah, who is a CEO like you, Lauren. Here we go, Sarah McKenna. And I'm going to let you introduce her because you guys are Silicon Alley pals out there in New York, right?
Yeah, we're happy to have Sarah McKenna on today, the CEO of Sequentum. I've known Sarah for a little bit here in New York. She's a veteran of the New York tech scene, knows data very well, knows everything from web scraping to, the whole ETL, ELT, whatever you want to call it, type space. And has, built her business over the last couple of years, bootstrapped, run it here out of New York City. I'm a huge fan of, the New York data scene. I think it's a more mature data scene. It's a better, than anything that's going on out in the Bay Area. Some people
I
might
like to consider
take
myself an
offense to that.
honorary member of it via Tech Bros, even though I'm on I'm on the
Yeah, we'll
don't
get
even
you. We'll
part of the
get
West
you.
Coast, but
We'll get you out here at some point. But yeah, Sarah, it's great to have you on. And we're going to talk about data elephants in the room today. And yeah, happy to hear your takes on everything. But it would be great to hear, your overview of, what you're building, who you are, and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, thanks for so much for having me. I'm so honored to be on Tech Bros. And I agree with you. I think the data scene in New York is really phenomenal. A lot of it's driven by the finance industry and their early adoption at such a massive scale of data-driven decision making and algorithmic trading. But at Sequentum, we started out with basically just having a harvester that was really, really powerful for web scraping. And we got a little funding from a quant fund, and we immediately needed to, operationalize. And I brought in, people from my background, which is all startups in Silicon Alley, kind of across the industry and tech stack, but with a focus on large scale automation. And so I brought in, all of these folks, mostly quality assurance, test automation folks, and we operationalized web scraping, which basically web scraping is like the Netflix chaos monkey of data pipelines. So what we ended up doing, we didn't mean to do this, we weren't setting out to do this, but we basically built the all-in-one data platform that everybody needs. So like, we're getting compared to Starburst or Nextla. We do the ingestion, we do the transformation, the AI enrichment, the structure, the delivery. We have quality monitoring, built into every step of the data journey. Transparency and visibility, so all the various stakeholders in that operation can trust what's happening and can see what's happening. There's permissions and encryption and audit trails and approval workflows, everything that you would need, where in this field that we were in, which was, primarily, 5 years ago, we were just serving SEC governed finance institutions with mission critical data that they were,
Sure.
monetizing at a very large scale. And yeah, so now we've been expanding industries and growing out into, basically looking at the data industry at large. We have a lot of corporates now as customers. We have government agencies, and we're sort of we're really happy to see all the trends and themes in the data industries that we basically already have in our tech stack, like data observability or composability or data as a product, or all of these things that people like to speak about, but they're just kind of common sense. Like you must have them.
Sure, sure. And it's super interesting, when you're selling to financial institutions right off the bat, like you're selling to some of the, biggest players out there with, big pockets, which like is kind of, I don't want to say it spits in the face, but it's like the opposite of like what we see a lot of times with, investors will go in and, fund a company that does a point solution or maybe two things. And they say like, open source this, sell it to, other startups, get that traction, and then we're going to move up market. You started up market, and then, now as you've grown over the last couple of years, maybe, your product also works for mid-market companies. Your product also works for other companies. Like you can move down a little bit. Like how do you think about all that, like as a strategy? And I'm fully of the opinion that like the best companies are typically like in the data space, leave consumer and stuff out of it, but in the data space, like the ones that sell into larger companies first, one, like it's better outcomes for the founders. Usually there's less, you don't need to raise as much money in subsequent rounds. And two, like you get that discipline early, of,
Mhm.
selling to like audited, like very highly regulated businesses. And then, you can do anything, you can drop your prices or do whatever to sell to other customers. But did you come to that organically, or is it just like that's, your background and where you saw the market? Like, how do you think about all that selling to like large companies versus small companies versus mid market and everything?
Well, I think, the fact that I have 25 years of building startups, comes into play in selling to large companies, right? I've gotten audit accreditation for my automated operations. I've gotten security audit accreditations. I've like built out, secure networks and secure software. And I spun up 25,000, automated test cases for a banking straight through processing system that handled all the trades for 80 banks, back in 2001, and we had to be
Hmm.
audited on a regular basis. So like, for me in startups, it was always about, the way to bake in that value is to automate everything that you could in the most trustworthy and governable way possible, because it's the only way that anyone was ever going to trust you, and that you knew that you could stop, focusing on what's going wrong, what could possibly going wrong, and shift your focus to let's add more value, let's keep adding features, right? And so that was always our focus. And in this case, the need was so strong. So before I went into dot-coms in the 90s, I worked at a startup, which was a hedge fund. I worked at Third Point. It was just Dan Loeb and I got to see through his investments sort of the whole gamut of how hedge funds work and how all the trading works, and all those special situations and strategies that he employed. I was basically executing all of them and keeping track of all the trades and all the dollars that were going in every direction. And so I had that education. When I went into startups, my specialty very quickly became automation and scaling, basically locking in the value of whatever the startup was that I was with, but also super scaling it through intelligent tools that were just maximizing the capacity of the team. And then at some point, I was recruited by some private equity group to go into a data scraping company, and I was like, "What? Is that even legal? Like, that's weird." And they were like, "Look, it's a straight up automation problem," which of course is my brain candy at this point in my career, and they were having problems with blocking, right? So at the same time that finance was really cluing in to the value that they could get from, live data feeds and algorithmic
Hmm.
trading, there were hundreds of millions of dollars getting invested into bot blocking. So it became this very technically challenging uh, automation technology problem. And so I went in and sort of turned around this scraping company. I got the tech working. We had we were making 800,000 more per quarter from existing contracts because the tech was always running. We were never blocked.
Yeah.
And it was super fun. So interesting. And I learned so much about scraping. And at some point it was like boring, right? That's what happens to startups people, right? You need to be challenged, otherwise you start getting bored. And I put my hand
Right.
up. I looked around. I saw what was happening in data. I saw what was happening in hedge funds, and I said, look, I want to be the alt data product manager. I'm in New York. I know all these hedge fund people, like from the 90s. I met them. They were all in the same room. Like, I'm sure that I can go and sell. I know what they need. I know how they need it. I know how this operation needs to work. I know what their governance concerns are. And so the first hedge fund I met with ended up recruiting me to come run Sequentum, which, at the time was this sort of desktop, installable, where you would point and click and create little agents, but there was no way to operationalize them, right? So I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I was totally green with envy. They had a point and click interface and this custom Chrome browser, which is incredibly technically complex to build, like very, very difficult. And they had truly simplified the scraping part, which is the absolute hardest part of any kind of pipeline or data ingestion. Um, and uh, and so I jumped at that chance. And with WorldQuant, they invested, not very much, but they helped to give credibility and open doors. And so we got a couple anchor customers, and based off of them built the platform. And we have a center of excellence operation in India, and we kind of went 0 to 60 overnight.
Wow.
Really, really fun.
What's the timeline been? How long since you've been at Sequentum, Sarah?
I started in November of 2017, and right around the time we got the small amount of funding from WorldQuant, and then we had our first anchor customer go live in March, and we just started signing more and more after that. We released our the platform, was first generally available in August. And we really beefed it out by the next summer and had full support manual and training, digital training courses, and all that good stuff. And then I spent probably 18 months bringing our, compliance operating guidelines to the Alt Data Council under the Financial Information Standards Division. Worked with the compliance teams of all the big SEC governed institutions to publish. You can't call them standards because we're not in the business of giving legal advice, but basically we had a big hand at defining the standards for how to operate, mitigating risks in when scraping for finance. So it was really, we were kind of rocketed. We call ourselves bootstrap because the funding we got was so small, but we were definitely aided a lot by WorldQuant, and just by the fact that we had so much expertise already in what the requirements needed to be, and there was such a strong need.
Well, congrats.
So
It's an exciting time for things taking off. Yeah, go ahead, Lauren.
Yeah, let's back it up for the audience a little bit here. Like, if people don't know, like, when you say alt data and web scraping, like, what are examples of what that means? And like, people, I think, don't understand truly, like, as consumers, or even as, like, I don't know, a data engineer possibly at some company, or like, what alt data means, and like, what are some specific ways that you're driving value for your customers?
And we'll have
Whether
to get
they're
back.
large
We're gonna
corporations.
do a show on alt data, so we'll have you back for this. So this is like the
okay,
preview to
sure.
that. Let's get into it now.
Yeah, and like whether you're selling, your customer is a financial institution, or it's just a large corporation. Like, what does that kind of all mean?
Yeah, so let's say, traditionally you had the, financial analysts would be looking at things like earnings reports, standardized reporting that happens quarterly on a schedule. It all comes out, at a certain time, and everyone has access to the exact same reports and, calls. And they all are based on this information comes out, every few months.
Like 10K, 10Q.
Yeah. So, but between those, that's traditional data. But between those months, meanwhile, all of those companies are transacting business online. So you can see how many pizzas Domino's sold. You can see how many hammers are left on the shelves at Home Depot for this brand or that brand, right? You can see these things through public web data. If you're pulling it in the right way. So depending on your investment strategy, you're going to be looking at different types of data. So if you're a quant fund, maybe you're looking at, sort of Google Trends, and like how, you can see these sort of these huge trends, and you basically take all of these data feeds together, and you create, positive signal, negative signal, and you portfolio managers sort of mathematically figure out how to package those together into positions and portfolios, and they automate trading. And they, it's if they're not competing with too many funds that have all the same data sets doing all the same things, then they have an edge, they have alpha. But even if you're just doing long short equity, and you're using the data to inform your decisions, maybe there's nothing automated, there's no algorithms involved, but you might look at things like, you might pull down used car data or used RV or motorcycle data, just to give you a macroeconomic indicator of consumer confidence going into the summer. Right. That's are they sitting there? Are they selling? Are they selling for less than they were originally posting for? Are they being returned to the site? You can track these things through VIN numbers, through, just repetitive, ingestion of, this data. And with brands and products, you can see on websites, that show inventory counts per store. You can see exactly what products are moving and what are not. And so not just finance, but brands themselves can monitor their own products or their competitors' products, whoever's in their categories. And it's, McKinsey says that you can increase your revenue year over year by 40% when you introduce data-driven decision-making. And so these alternative data sources, they're also called external data sources. In other words, they're not coming from inside the company. They're not official reporting. They're just sort of observations from the public internet. They're really valuable. But it's the hardest type of data to ingest. It's not like going to Salesforce, which our platform can easily go to, any type of source that Fivetran would go to, right? Where the interface almost never changes, right? It's always the same type of data. It's you build one connector
right.
and it
You're just
and it
going off
runs
the
for the
API
next
and
decade, right? Like that's not what you're dealing with in web. So having our start there has actually forced us to build an incredibly powerful platform that's, that we think is, because you have to make it easy to maintain, efficient. It has to be super governable if you're dealing with, bodies that are, really, really concerned with risk mitigation. So yeah, that's where
absolutely.
There's nothing underhanded or sketchy about alt data. It's just external data. Like the name makes it think that there might be something, to the dark about it, but it's just external data.
A lot of people are just, in my opinion, are just immature about like this type of stuff. Oh, it's alt data. Like, well, it's on the internet, and like, large corporations, financial institutions, they're going to pay for it. They want to get an edge. They want to see what their competitors are doing. They want to see how the market's moving, right? Like, that's my opinion on it. Like, and this is where all the value is in data. The value, and like, the value is not in getting data from system A to system B. Data, the value is in doing something with it.
Right. And all data is also like satellite data and IoT data. It's not just web scrape data. It's all of the data that goes into those, like consumer, like credit card, data, anonymized data. Like that's all data.
Right.
Web data is about 40% of the alt data that's used in the finance industry. So it's but I mean, we for our customers that subscribe to all kinds of different services, like they'll subscribe to research or they'll subscribe to different, data feeds. We also ingest all of that. Like we both license our software and we operate it for our clients depending on their internal staffing needs. And companies will use our software for market data. They'll use it for web data. They'll use it for any kind of data, even traditional data. They can go out to sec.gov and pull down, all the traditional data for their, that sort of foundation that they need. But that's funny. I actually have never heard anyone say that alt data was at all sketchy.
I think it's because it's a term I didn't know. So that's why, because I was thinking of it as like, I'm just showing my, as Lauren said there, my immaturity in the space by saying it in that way. But I'm learning about alt data. So,
well, I think the like elephants in the room that we wanted to go over here, like you brought it up several times now, like, before the show, we chatted with Sarah, like, oh, what are some things you want to chat about? And I think one is risk, and a lot of like one of the big trends in the last couple of years, and I see this from small businesses all the way up to like enterprise, is the rise in data tooling. The number of data vendors that someone has, or whether that's something like Sarah's company, or the observability tool plus your Fivetran or whatever, plus whatever. Like in these situations, like how are people managing risk out there, and are they managing risk? And Sarah, you called out one of your elephants in the room. We kind of wanted to go over here, but is anyone actually managing risk in a lot of cases of like onboarding all these SaaS or other solutions that move data around, oftentimes for other SaaS solutions? And I think the answer is no, but I'm curious to hear what you think, Sarah, or if anyone out in the
Yeah,
audience
I
is
mean,
there. Like, I'd be curious to know. Audience, leave comments or anything.
I think what one of the things that's new is this Chat GPT, and it's bringing to the fore the risk that you're dealing with in dealing with data, right? OpenAI is being sued by Getty, and you have
Hmm.
all these new lawsuits. Like Reddit is now saying they're putting up a paywall for their API. There's all this new risk associated with if you're generating like music, for example, right? If you're using generative AI to create music, but they're like clear riffs from, the voice or the
Right.
sound or whatever it is from a particular artist, like there's, you know, there's a potential for having no value at all. And before generative AI sort of came to the fore, when we realized, oh my God, this is totally possible at a very large scale. There were more traditional risks, the more run-of-the-mill risks, like obviously copyright is one of them. Personal data, right, which is widely available on the net, right? You really don't want to be dealing with that at all. The laws are all over the place, and they're different in so many different jurisdictions. You might get in trouble in one and not another, but why do you want that? And other things are like, um, if you're web scraping in particular, you want to make sure you don't hit those sites too hard, because then you're going to be assessed for liabilities. And if you are, how are you going to prove that you're not the origin of 100% of the bot traffic on their site, and therefore responsible for exponentially larger sums than you would otherwise be if you had some kind of a log or evidence-based audit of
Hmm.
exactly what your traffic is and what your behaviors are, right? So you know we think about risk as, it's like in security, right? You're never secure. There's nothing that's truly secure. You just layer a bunch of risk mitigation strategies on top of each other, and you're very active and
Sure.
continuously improving, right? And it's basically all people, process, and tools. And so you make sure your people are aware of the risks. You make sure your tools are tracking everything, and they can drive accountability, down to the individual. So you have that continuous improvement process. You can identify the risky behaviors or identify things that aren't kosher, and then educate and train. And then, of course, you need operating guidelines and things that your lawyers and your business, major stakeholders are comfortable with. Um, so that's kind of how we've approached it, and so we have permissions and audit trails and controls, and then everything is transparent. Every agent, we call them agents. You can call them pipes or um, bots. Our platform automatically documents them, so it's very clear exactly what they're doing. And there's no mystery. It's human readable. You don't have to go in and read Python code or anything like that. But
So
those are, in general, I would say, everyone
you and
needs to be doing that.
Sequentum are doing this well. We know enough about you and your company and your product. Know you're doing it
Yeah.
well. What's your critique of what's happening out there in general? That
I think that in the beginning, there was a rush to get data from point A to point B. And, it's like, what is that data? How do you know that, this is actually used RV data? Like, how do you actually know what this is? Is it not someone behind the scenes sort of filling in all the gaps using generative AI, or just typing out whatever they want? How do you know that? And if you're basing pricing algorithms and yield algorithms off of this data, it better be right, and it better be trustworthy, or it's really going to hurt you. And now with the generative AI and businesses integrating OpenAI, which is so easy to do. It's just amazing. There's a whole new set of risks. Like, you really need to know what the data is that's training the AI and driving those the data-driven decisions. You really have to know what that data is. And I don't think that anyone was really thinking that through. Like, the whole idea of data observability being outside of the tool that's doing the ingestion or the tool that's doing the transformation, like, that makes no sense to me at all. Like, you need it there every step of the data journey, right? You need to know if this data is ever deviating from the acceptance criteria or success criteria, and you need to know where things break down, like, right away, right? Because your business decision making is depending on this data. It's mission critical, right? And so that, we look at these data observability tools that are outside of the core data operations systems, and we can't understand how anyone thought that was a good idea. Like, I understand the modern data stack, like the way that VC funding works. You fund these little tiny micro, tools, and eventually their plan is to get all bought up and integrated. But basically these large corporations that are now dependent on this data to get their edge are having to deal with all these different contracts and renewal schedules and upgrade schedules, and it's very difficult to have a real robust, quality, value-oriented operation that everyone trusts, all the stakeholders trust, when you have all those little tiny pieces that are just totally independent of one another. But yeah,
Yep.
quality is not something that you want to separate and do at the 11th hour. That's what we learned in startups in the 90s, right? When we started going into the agile, methodology, when we started, working on all of that, it was basically an effort to get away from the idea of waterfall, which having the quality happen at the very 11th hour when everyone's already invested all their dollars and time and thought in building this thing. You can't then figure out that there's major design flaws, right? You need to shift left and have all of your acceptance criteria defined in the very, very beginning, and don't release anything unless it's passing all the acceptance criteria, right? And that's, so that's kind of how we built our platform. That's the way we think that anyone in our space should be thinking about data.
Yeah, and this is funny to me because this is my own view of all this, right? Like, by separating it, the point B, if it's Snowflake or Google cloud platform or whatever, these tools are doing these observability checks, after the fact. And what are they doing? What is it actually doing? Well, it's a bunch of SQL queries usually that runs like full table scans and does like null checks and everything after it's been landed. So you're really just increasing your compute, bill.
Yeah, it's more expensive. What are you going to rerun the
Right.
entire thing? Double the cost of your project, triple it every time it finds an issue? Like, you're going to do the whole thing and then you're going to find an issue and do the whole thing again, and then you're going to find it and do the whole, it's like you're never going to get off the ground. You see all of this chatter in the data industry with these people who they can't, they get laid off, right? Because they're not able to show the ROI for their data
Right.
programs. And I swear to God, I think this is it. Like, if they don't define, like, I remember this in software back in the late 90s, right? Before we really had agile. Like, it was a nightmare. People were like, well, we already spent our entire wad on this software, and what do you mean it doesn't work? We have to go back and redo it again. Like, I've been at startups where we got to the 11th hour and we tested, and they just said, like, over the weekend, they basically said, that's it, we're shutting down. Too many bugs. It's going to be too much money to fix all these. Funding's
Right.
dried up. It's like, what?
Right.
Oh.
It's brutal. It's the whole thing's brutal, and the whole thing's happening over again. And I don't know.
I love the
I
data
think
mesh. I
it's
love
funny.
Zhamak Dehghani. I don't know how to pronounce her name.
Yeah, Jamak. Yeah.
Zhamak.
Yeah. What's your take? What's your take there on everything with the data mesh?
Oh, every time she speaks, I'm just like, yes, 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 that's right. You got it. Yes, like everything. I just
Right.
completely agree with her. And she cites a lot of the original luminaries that we were following in QA, like Martin Fowler. And she in her book she talks about. She's like, well,
Mhm.
I didn't invent this. This was something we figured out in software, and I was right there. We were learning all those things together and
For
implementing
for
these sort of
for
best
people who
practices.
for people
Yeah.
who don't know, Sarah or Lauren, just give the 20-second description of what data mesh is.
So,
And
yeah.
yeah.
So basically, it's the assumption that you're going. I mean, and I'm probably defining it in my own biased
Mhm.
way, but
That's
it's
fine.
the assumption that what we're all headed towards is basically like an operating system where data is treated as a product, and every pipeline or whatever it basically has a um, you know uniform interface, and you can expect that the data is going to be you know um, the level of quality that's defined in the SLAs, and that it's basically you're going to have all this cross integration,
Mm.
and you're going to be able to enable unbelievable efficiencies because everything's going to work. So the data mesh is like an operating system for all pipelines going in every direction, and it's governed. It has there's federated governance. So you have all those ideas around like a data contract, and you have all the best practices of automation. So like every unique element is like an atomic, you know, um,
Mhm.
thing that only gets, if it changes, all the downstream dependencies on that will automatically inherit the new change,
Right.
all that good stuff. I
And
don't,
ju-
Lauren,
and
do you wanna
It's
try and
basically it's
improve on
no.
what
This
Becky
is no, and you said it correctly, right? And like a lot of it's also like better schema management. I would add on all that, and like any changes are propagated downstream. The owners of a domain, whether you're the go-to-market person or you're the risk manager or you're the marketing person or whatever, like you operate these systems and you're held accountable to the quality of data within your domain before it's propagated outwards. And right now everything that all the vendors push because they want to fight over workloads and workflows that go through their system. They'll say, "Oh, we're the single source of truth. Dump it all in here." Well, of course, they want you to dump the most amount of data in there because the more data you dump in there in their storage, the more they're going to charge you on, and the
Yeah.
more spread out it is, the more you're going to have to compute to get it to what you want the end state to be.
Yeah.
Um,
Mm-mm.
so,
Yeah, we're
like,
totally allergic to
it's
expense, and like, our software is always going to run on prem, right? We're always going to. I mean, we have like a cloud native, you know, browser place where you can create agents and whatnot, but we're never going to be cloud only. Like we're always going to, have support for the lowest cost compute, and because it's not
sure,
about. Right. Like I understand Microsoft, like, that's their business. They want you to, rack up a lot of expense on Azure. Like we're the opposite. We're like, we don't care about that spend at all. We really want to just drive the value. We want to be a value driver. We want to be an operating system. Yeah.
right. I've never actually heard a good argument against the data mesh. The only arguments I've heard are, well, it doesn't work for small companies, which, okay, sure. Like, but like, you probably have like four systems and you're joining some data together. You probably don't even need all this data warehouse stuff to begin with. Uh, I've heard that argument, and then I've heard just a bunch of others, people who are like, "No, this isn't how it works at my company now." And like, I've actually never heard a good argument. And if anyone's in the audience or like watches this later, like email me. You can find my email, Lauren at Upright Analytics, or email Mary. And like, if you want to make a good argument against the data mesh, like, go ahead and do it, and we'll have you on or something. Because like,
Well,
this is basically just how
the pushback
like
was really the parts of the modern data stack that we're pushing
yeah,
back
but
against.
they're all the loud people. They're all just loud people who have equity stakes in each other's companies and benefit from the stuff being split up like that.
Well, I
I've
think they
never
just
really
think
heard a good argument.
I think they just think it's overly utopian and that it's too hard and you're not going to be able to achieve it. And, a lot of those people might have already invested, as you said, in, quite a rich ecosystem of tools to the tune of, millions and millions of dollars.
Billions,
So
billions.
so the expense to migrate away from all of that to something new that seems really utopian, seems a little far-fetched. But like we dealt with this for decades in test automation. People would say, "There's no way that you can do this," and then we would do it, and it was just it was like unbridled joy. Like it was just people loved it so much, because they could focus on building new features and improving things rather than fighting fires. And that's really what we're dealing with in this whole data layer, this new data layer. They talk about, the other thing is, like, people say data is the new oil. Like, can we stop saying that? Data is not oil. Oil is one thing. It has one chemical breakdown. It does exactly like, it's literally one thing. Data is like everything under the sun. There's streaming audio and video and images and text and documents and all kinds of different data structures and formats and media formats. And, it's just this, anyway, so much to talk about.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I'm sure you have a take on MongoDB as well. Being in the New York Times, I'm not going to push you for a hot take, but
I super scaled a MongoDB and ran into the limits, and it was painful. I was really excited about it in the beginning, and at the end, I was kind of happy to move to another company. Yeah.
It's all fun. Like what so some other, like, advice here, like, I'd be curious, like, to people who and so you started your career just working with different, financial institutions and such, with the technology lens and software lens on everything.
I worked at a lot of
Like,
video game companies also, like gaming
in
companies.
video game. Sure.
Any
What
wacky
made you
tech
take the leap?
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. What made you take the leap to CEO and like running a company, and like how it, like what advice would you have for someone who, like, maybe they're a product manager, or maybe they've, been a VP somewhere and done the latter, like, taking that jump to CEO, like what did you learn there, and like what advice would you have for people?
Yeah, for me, I always, I think back in my career and I think, like, God, what a random path I went on, totally random. And, but the truth is that I had been offered the CEO position before Sequentum, and I didn't take it because I thought I was so perfectly suited for the engineering leadership. But then when they brought in the new CEO, it was me and my team that got replaced, right? Because that's what a lot of CEOs do. Not everyone, but the thing that happens in tech startups is, there's layoffs and it sucks, right? So for me, yeah, I'm really interested in the value. I've always been entrepreneurial. I always wanted to have my own business, but I could never, like, I was too cash, poor to launch, my own. So I would always join something very entrepreneurial for a wage plus, some kind of bonus or incentive or equity or something. And so when I got to a certain level in my career, I just started thinking, gosh, I think I should be the CEO. I can do all of these roles. I've done them all at startups. I've worn 100 hats. I can do the accounting. I can do all the finance. I could do all the recruiting and hiring and training. I can set the standards. I'm interested in culture. My parents were, diplomats. I moved to a different country every 2 years. Like I'm comfortable just, I can do a lot. I can get up on stage. I can, and I just thought,
You can come on Tech Bros, no problem.
Yeah. So Sequentum was really just a really great opportunity for me. The guys that were the original founders of that, web harvester. They were in Australia. They needed someone with an SSN here. So it really worked. And it's been really, really fun. I think it's kind of also like the stereotype of the female CEO. You get handed something that's a little bit on fire. We were bootstrapped. We didn't have funds. We were basically making ends meet from whatever dollar we could sell, build, deliver, and collect. So I'm not sure that anyone else would have taken that role, but it's
And
to me it's been perfect.
you're obviously thriving in it. Do you kind of, now that you're doing it, do you think, wow, I could have been a CEO sooner? Or
Yeah, I do. I think that a lot. I think, why
Mm,
didn't I do this earlier? Why was I
mm,
so insecure? Why did I think that I needed to work underneath, the people that were making decisions about, who stays and who goes and who gets a promotion and who doesn't? Like, why did I always feel that I had to be in the support role?
mm. I think
And
we're socialized and conditioned to like not go
yeah,
for jobs unless we're 150% qualified,
but
whereas
I
the men
also
who have
feel like,
50% of the qualifications go for it.
why can't I find someone who will work under me that the way that I worked under so many others? Like to that,
Mm,
to stay up all night long to make it just perfect,
mm.
because that was just like, I don't know, I was into it, like, it's, I don't know why I did that. I did it startup after startup after startup after startup, just as an employee with a small equity package, anyway, I got here eventually, I guess. But I encourage women out there to, just put their hat in the ring. I mean, I never was denied any leadership opportunities. I would always put my hat in the ring for that. I was always interested in a leadership role. Um, but it's, they say it's lonely or thankless or whatever it is. It's hard, but it's really fun. If you can make it work,
Absolutely.
you hire all your besties. You hire the people you love to work with who do amazing work, and it's you just find so much joy and value, and it's just a win-win-win for customers, employees, for you. Go for it.
Awesome. Love it. Love it. Yeah. Great.
Awesome. I mean, anyone in the comments, feel free to leave any comments about anything here.
And
Look, we got a few minutes left.
yeah, just so you know, Lauren, I told Sarah this, that we have most people watch the show in recording. We have fewer live people this week because I messed something up with the LinkedIn invites. I overdid it on the LinkedIn events this week. So when I started sending out invites to come see this show last night, it was like, you can no longer send out any invites, but it's all good. People watch the recording afterwards, but normally we have more people in the comments chiming in. So,
Yeah, with a few minutes left here, Sarah, like what's next? What's the rest of the year 2023 look like for Sequentum and for the data space in general? And are we going to see a lot of these data companies start falling? If they start falling, are you hunting after their customers? Are you going to stay focused and build out a bigger feature set? Like what's on the roadmap for both you and the market in general?
Yeah, I mean, I will say that as a bootstrapped company, we pay less attention to the competition than we do to our customers and our roadmap. And while I think that there are a lot of VC funded companies that are running into some headwinds now because the dollar costs so much more, I don't really care about that. The thing that I'm excited about is we're putting out a self-service platform, and we're going to start with, basically API integrations first. So we're going to go live really just for a couple of customers, and we're going to be basically powering apps and users on their end. and doing things like adding intelligent automation into their apps using web data and other data sources. And then the second phase launch of the self-service platform is we're going to add a bunch of connectors for just typical things like download your Venmo transactions, download like whatever the there's a long list of these things, but we're going to put a bunch of those out. And then towards the end of the year, depending on our hiring, maybe the start or middle of next year, we're going to release our self-service editor, which allows you to point and click and create these intelligent agents in the browser. So right now we have our software is mostly Windows on-premise, and we have it ported now to Linux and in the browser, and we're just slowly, it's like Adobe Photoshop in terms of features. It's 15 years of feature development, like slowly getting moved out to the self-service platform. So we're super excited about that, and we think that with these LLMs and open AI keys, already what we've been able to do for our customers is simply mind-blowing. Adding intelligence into this automation, we think that there's going to be a whole world of creators that are creating all kinds of apps and intelligent offerings, and we think we're going to be the platform to drive that.
Excellent. Cool. And then where can people learn more about you or say hi or learn more about Sequentum?
I mean, we're in New York City. We go to all the, data events. We go to the portable data happy hour that Ethan puts out there. We go to the alt data happy hour that Jordan Hauer of Amass Insights does. We're at a bunch of conferences. And of course, we're on LinkedIn, and you can always, send a note into our website contact form, and we're happy to meet up and really interested in hearing other use cases and finding innovative partners. If there's a need for any kind of challenging workflow that involves ingesting data, transforming it, enriching it with AI, structuring it, delivering it, we can pretty much do anything under the sun very quickly. As I said, with good governance.
What's your take on what's working right now from a marketing perspective, either for you or other companies out there? Obviously, I'm asking you this for my own purposes to get ideas for my own day job. But what strategies?
So we just hired a marketing manager for the first time. And, she's telling us, she's totally beating us up and telling us that, basically we have built nothing of a marketing engine. Like the only thing that we do right now is we have some outbound emails, and that's enough to drive, almost, it's like literally like kind of crushing demand. But what she's doing is she's basically figuring out how we stack up against all the other platforms out there, like how our feature set compares, what are the terms that the industry is using, and developing content and whatnot to create the funnel through our website. Socials, we do almost nothing on social. Like we almost never post anything, but that's hopefully going to change. But I think it's one thing when you're bootstrapped and profitable and you're just completely customer obsessed. That's one kind of marketing. That's like the first phase, the founder sort of led phase. But when you get to the next phase, you really do need to take advantage of the data-driven marketing automation. And that is something that we're just dipping our toes into, and we're very excited about it.
Yeah, and a good time to be dipping your toes into it, just with everything changing with the ChatGPT and the rest.
Yeah, that makes it
ads and SEO and how the efficacy of any of it or all of it is evolving. So
yeah, I think people are not that interested in receiving emails, but I think the problem is felt so intensely in the data industry, the problem of not knowing what the data is or how to get it or where it is or whether it's good enough quality or having trust problems. Like, I think the problem is literally so painful that people are still answering emails and saying, okay, show me a demo. You know, I want to listen to what you have to say. You know,
So it's just any way of getting the pain point across. People are listening. That's great.
people are listening because it's keenly
Yeah.
felt. Yeah.
Super interesting. Super interesting. Great.
Mhm.
Great. Well, come back anytime. You're a tech bro. When we have swag, we'll send you some.
Yeah, how fun. Thank you for having me. This
Our
has been
marketing
great.
machine is also barely getting started, but you know, one of these days. Any last questions, Lauren?
No, thanks for being on, and yeah, we'll have this posted shortly on the socials.
Thank you
Thanks
so
for joining
much.
us, Sarah.
Yep.
Awesome.
Talk to you later.
Thanks, guys.
Take care.
Bye.